you're getting ready to fundraise for your nonprofit, what materials or assets do you need to have ready to be successful? In this Changemaker Cafe episode, we'll talk about 4 critical fundraising materials you need to create or update each year, what they include, and how you'll use them out in the real world. And by the way, this topic was requested by longtime viewer Leah. Thank you, Leah. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content on nonprofits, fundraising, and more. And thanks to Click and Pledge for sponsoring this video. Okay, so real quick, before you can even sit down to create any of these 4 fundraising items that I'm going to talk to you about, you need to have a few things ready that are going to help you create all those materials. So let's go through that list first. First, your organization's budget and fundraising goals for the year. The materials that you're going to create will require you to probably get specific about your needs, so having this information in hand when you go to create the materials is going to be critical. You're going to want your impact goals for the year. That is, how many people or animals or communities you aspire to serve this year through your nonprofit's programming. This should be completely aligned with your fundraising goals and budget, which means your budget should have been developed to ensure that you could cover the costs of achieving those goals that you set. You're going to need your mission statement and program descriptions. You'll most likely be using both of these on all of the materials we're going to talk about. Your mission statement and program description should really be free of jargon. They should be clear and easy to understand. You're going to want some testimonials and stories. So any impact stories or testimonials that you already have from those your organization has already served go a long way in creating these compelling fundraising materials. Stories can even be more powerful than data in influencing donations. So if you don't have these written down somewhere yet, I highly recommend taking some time to collect them from your team and writing them out. In fact, you might try creating what's called a story bank, which is someplace online, like a shared document or a file folder where your team and you can collect and track impact stories and record them as soon as they happen. Then when you need them for marketing or fundraising materials later, you just have some ready to go. You're going to want to be able to show your evidence of success so far, and then of course the actual data around your past impacts. This could be number of people or animals served, milestones reached, statistics around how successful your programs are, etc. Now, like I said, these items will become the ingredients for each of the 4 materials I'm about to talk through. So let's get into our first fundraising item that you need to have now. Okay, imagine you had an idea for a program that you thought would make a dent in the problem of, say, food insecurity in your community. And as you're describing this program idea to a friend, they reply, "But how can you prove that your program would actually work?" A theory of change is a document that essentially outlines your evidence for why you think your specific program will lead to the community change that you say it will. For example, if you think your program will reduce food insecurity in your city by 50%, what evidence do you have to support that outcome is likely? Many funders, grant makers, community partners, big donors, etc., they're going to ask to see your theory of change document before considering funding your organization in any significant way. Why? Because they also want to see evidence that if they donate to your cause, it's likely to lead to the impact that you say it will. A theory of change is also an excellent document for internal planning and clarity. So if your mission is to end hunger in your city, for example, going through the process of creating a theory of change forces you and your team to think very intentionally about how you would design an effective solution for hunger. I go into depth about how to create a theory of change in another video, so I'm not going to repeat all of that here, but I will give you a high-level overview of what it looks like and what it includes. So let's talk about that real quick. Think of the appearance of your theory of change as like a roadmap with stepping stones, and each step is going to show how your process and methods will lead to your end outcome. But you're going to start at the end. You're going to start with your long-term impact in the future. Let's say helping single mothers access affordable medical care. In my example theory of change, you see that my long-term goal here is to provide affordable care to 50% of single mothers in my community who live below the poverty line. If I am successful in my program, then over the long term, these single mothers will get the medical care they need without having to sacrifice other basic needs like food or rent to afford it. So the theory of change roadmap will answer these questions about all this. Your inputs. In other words, what resources will be required for your program to be successful and reach this long-term impact? This could be staff, training, equipment, space, technology, etc. Then you've got your services or activities. What will you actually do to reach this long-term impact? Or put another way, what services or programs will you offer? In my example, the organization plans to build a community clinic to provide free or low-cost services to single mothers. Then you've got your strategies. This is how will you design your program or processes to know that you're going to be successful. In my example here, you can see that this imaginary clinic plans to collect feedback regularly through surveys, as well as provide holistic information about other resources for clients as part of this strategy, as part of their methods. Then you've got your outputs or immediate impacts. These are the results you'll see right away. Perhaps it's the number of single mothers served or the amount of savings each client reports having as a result of your clinic. And finally, you've got your outcomes or long-term impacts. These are the results you might see in a few years that take longer to materialize. In our example, this might be how these mothers are using your clinic and report being able to save for their child's education as a result. This is a long-term effect. You can create a theory of change in a document or using Canva or other tools, and there are tons of templates online too if you need a special guide. The second must-have fundraising item you've got to prepare and keep updated is called a case for support. And I happen to have another video talking about this in depth as well on how to create this, but again, we'll do a high-level overview here just to get you started. Whereas a theory of change shows your rationale for why a program should lead to the results that you promise, a case for support takes that evidence and turns it into a compelling argument for why someone should fund your organization or project right now. So think of your case for support as a fundraising manifesto for your cause. It can be adapted into a brochure, used in grant applications, or used on a website, or even in a video. You're gonna share your case for support with major donors, grant makers, sponsors, or even publicly so people can learn more in depth about your efforts. A case for support should ultimately feel like a persuasive story. It should answer, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Why are you the organization to try to solve that problem? Why is your mission important now? And why should someone give you funding, especially now? I'm actually going to show you a real life example here in a second that I really like. It's an online version of the case for support for Habitat for Humanity. So I'll share my screen and let's take a look together. So the first thing I notice is that it's just very visually beautiful. You've got all these large pictures and graphics that tell the story. So let's get into some of these details here and see if they answer the questions we stated. Right off the bat, okay, so Habitat is talking about their long track record of success here. They're establishing their reputation right in the beginning. Since 1976, Habitat has helped more than 46 million people build homes, communities, and hope. So they've got you right there with that reputation. And then they're going to get into what the problem is that they are trying to solve, which was, of course, one of our questions. They're talking about how big the problem is, and they really back this up with several compelling statistics. So, for example, 40% of people around the world will live in inadequate housing by 2030 unless they receive assistance. This is actually a really interesting statistic, and I'll tell you why. They're talking about the consequences of not funding their work. So that's kind of one of the ways to position yourself is to talk about, well, what would happen if we don't intervene and do something about this problem? So they offer some more here. They talk about how 37 million households in the US pay more than 30% of their income in housing, which, as we know, is the threshold for whether housing is affordable. So they share all these stats. They even have a video. I'm not going to click that because I don't want the sound to disrupt what I'm sharing here, but you can take a look too. Okay, then they're getting into some of the more personal angles of this. They just shared all these statistics, but what we know about statistics is that sometimes they can feel impersonal. So they're bringing it home here. Because of ever rising and often unpredictable rents, many parents are forced to make impossible choices about food, healthcare, and education. That's a very relatable, personal situation. So they're really tapping into the power of personalized empathy here. Ooh, I like how the photos move here. An aging house with faulty wiring or leaking roof doesn't provide safe shelter. So continuing to make it personal, continuing to make it personal. Okay. Now, they mentioned their track record of success in the very beginning, but they're going to get into deeper detail on that here. So one of the questions, as you remember, is why your organization? This is where Habitat's going to answer this. Habitat is uniquely suited to address the problem. Let's see what they say. So they talk about their programs. Remember, they've got their program descriptions in here, what they do. Love the addition of personal photos here. And then they're going to talk about their results. And the results support their reputation and their credibility. More videos. They're talking about a couple of case studies here. So again, making it personal, something in the Chatham habitat in Pittsboro, North Carolina, something in Silicon Valley, survey of 100 families. Yep, then they've got that personal story, like really bringing it home with a real life testimonial of impact. Another point in the column of the why us is they're talking about their unique approach, right? So if you've ever worked with a Habitat or volunteered for Habitat, you know that their model is that volunteers partner with the future homeowners to build the homes, supervised, of course, by experienced staff who know what they are doing. So they're talking about the power of volunteers here and how that adds to their cost effectiveness and return on investment. Again, talking about their track record, their scale. Look at all these countries that they serve. They're getting to the transparency of their metrics here. And also their financial situation. These numbers are actually in the thousands of dollars. So if you're curious about the details of this, I'll share the link in the description of the video. You can get further into it. And then they end with a call to action. So hopefully you've been inspired by looking through their case for support, and now they want you to get in touch. You can download the case for support, and they want you to connect with them and become part of their community. So hopefully that gave you a little inspiration. As you can see, a case for support can really end up being more of a robust document or website, but it's also a good idea to have a one-pager, a brochure or a flyer that people can see online, share, or even hand out as needed that summarizes the high points. I like to call this a mini case for support. You'd use this at networking events, when your organization is out tabling in the community, at meetings with potential funders or donors, or at conferences. It's also a really great tool to give board members or volunteers so that they can hand something to the people they talk to when they're talking about your organization. And I have this example I can share. As you can see, it has a lot of the same elements of a more robust case for support. It's just more brief. It should include the problem you're trying to address in your community, the solution, in other words, your program or services, like the case for support, the specific funding you need to achieve your annual or short-term goal. Now, this is where your budget and fundraising goal especially comes in handy. And then the why us statement, something about your excellent reputation or past results. You'll offer a few impacts, data points, and maybe even a quick testimonial from someone that you helped. And finally, a way to contact you or find you online to learn more. And I also think it should be pretty visually simple, not too overdone with text, with maybe one or two, maybe three if they're really good photos or images. Now, in just a moment here, I'll share the fourth fundraising item you need in your arsenal. But before we do that, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, Click and Pledge. All of these fundraising materials won't matter if you don't have an easy way to collect and track your donations and fundraising. With Click and Pledge, you'll get a robust dashboard where you can plan your fundraising campaigns and monitor your progress. You'll get highly customizable donation forms, in-person fundraising features, peer-to-peer fundraising to allow your supporters to go form teams and raise money on your cause's behalf. Video fundraising with donation links embedded directly in your videos, text to give, donor outreach tools to improve donor retention, a complete Salesforce integration, many other integrations, and more. Here's the thing. Some platforms, they're going to charge more based on your organization's size, but not Click and Pledge. Their pricing stays the same even as your donor list increases. And nonprofits really appreciate how there are no contracts and their solutions are included at no extra cost. You can learn more about Click and Pledge's fundraising solutions and get your first $25 monthly fee waived using the links below this video or the QR code here. Get in contact with their team, ask any questions you have, schedule a demo, or you can sign up to give it a try right now. Fourth and finally, you've got to have basic slides that you can use and update for speaking engagements. Presenting to groups and funders can be a powerful way to grow your nonprofit's audience and share your story with those donors and funders. Personally, I have found some of our most long-standing, biggest funders, volunteers, and partners for my organization because of some presentation I did for a civic club or at a conference or company meeting. And if you're not already comfortable with public speaking, and let me tell you, neither was I. Fun fact, my first public speaking engagement was so terrible that I cried in my car afterward. But I saw how powerful it could be in growing our cause, so I worked really hard to get better at it. And now I speak professionally, so I highly recommend this as a skill every nonprofit or social impact leader build because it's going to be invaluable in so many situations. So all that is to say, when we're talking about a slide deck for a presentation, what should it include? It's about 10 things, and I'm going to show you as I walk you through an example presentation that I have. So let's get into this little example that I have. I'll just talk you through it. Again, this is just a template that I sometimes use with folks that I am advising or in my changemaker community. So starting with, obviously you've got your logo. This is a cover slide, but you're going to start with a hook, right? You want to get people interested, and I recommend some kind of personal story about someone that you've served, in this case, Roxy, an adorable puppy. So you want to tell the story of how they faced a need or a challenge because of the problem in your community that your organization is aiming to address. And then this will help you lead up to your argument for how to support your organization. All right. So we talked about Roxy, our hook story, and now we are going to talk about our organization. So we have started this organization, animal rescue nonprofit, and it's going to make sure that puppies like Roxy get the help that they need. So here you have below this your vision statement and then the plans for their programs and services, how they're going to reduce animal fatalities by performing rapid rescues. If you have the ability to do this, I also recommend sharing briefly your personal story for, if you are the founder, why you got started. What's your personal connection to the mission? If it's a board member or executive director presenting this, they can also share that for themselves. Then, just like in a lot of the other materials we've talked about, getting into the problem. We've got some statistics that back up why we know this is a problem in our community. In this hypothetical example that we're using, more animals are being abandoned each year in our city. Over the past 10 years, our city has seen a 115% increase. So these are the data points that demonstrate the problem that you're trying to tackle. Then you want to show, how does your organization tackle this problem? I don't know why it keeps doing that. I'm so sorry. The step-by-step process, right? So how does it work? Or if you're starting a nonprofit, how it will work, how you're planning for it to work. So you'll talk through your signature program. Let's say it's first you do a community assessment to understand where the most animals are being abandoned. Then you talk through how you help rescue the animals and then get them to the vet, and just basically the steps here. Then you talk about your goals for the upcoming time period. This is for the first year of an organization in this hypothetical, but you talk about your outcome that you're aiming for and how much money it's going to take to do that. Then you got your call to action. All the ways people listening to you can participate. Maybe it's donating, maybe it's sponsoring, maybe it's volunteering. I recommend offering several options because not everyone's always in a position to do one or the other. So giving them choices helps them feel included in the mission. And then, of course, contact information. And it could be a donate link here too. You don't want to leave without telling them how to get in touch with you, or else they might be super excited but never know how to reach you. So I want to clarify once again, this is just a foundation, an example, but you should be tweaking your presentation a little based on the specific audience that you're going to be talking to. For example, if I were talking to a group of individuals, I might emphasize multiple ways to help, like we talked about, from volunteering to attending an upcoming event to donating. Or if I were talking to a potential grant maker, I might emphasize our data around our past impacts or our financial statements or something else like that. Also, if other people on your team are speaking, like I said before, you should encourage them to think of their own personal story for how they're connected to the organization to be able to share for that part. So those are the 4 fundraising items that I highly recommend you create and keep updated every year. I'm curious, what do you think? Am I missing any that you have found particularly useful? Let me know in the comments. And I hope this gave you some helpful ideas for your fundraising. If it did, do me a favor and hit like on this video so more nonprofit leaders can see this. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next episode. And don't forget, you can always get more content in my weekly newsletter, and I have more resources on my website, changemakercafe.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Amber Melanie Smith, and I will see you later.